Welcome to the White Collar Advice channel. It is time for an update. And the idea for this update happened because this video I did with my friend Amy, we had 10, 12,000 views and then went to like 20, 25, 30 with tons of comments because people are fascinated and interested in this continuing Amazon saga. So Amy, can you please jump in and just to the extent that you can, give us an update from when we did that interview a year or so ago and we can just work our way through it?
Yeah, I'll give a minute of background,
Yes.
but and thank you for having me back on, Justin. My husband worked at Amazon Web Services, which is a subsidiary of Amazon, for 8 years. He left in 2019, and 10 months later, right at the beginning of the pandemic, the FBI knocked on our door and told him he was the target of a federal criminal investigation. And that, for us, was the beginning of a journey that has lasted even to today. The DOJ ultimately investigated him for 4 years. They never charged him, but it was a 4-year DOJ investigation where we learned that Amazon had gone to prosecutors and said that my husband had committed a crime called private sector honest services fraud, which is depriving your employer of your honest services. And despite never being charged, the DOJ, shortly after they accused my husband, seized all of our assets via civil forfeiture, held them for 22 months, during which time we had no ability to even fight to get them back. The FBI raided our home, and we lived through a lot of pressure and a lot of threats. Amazon also sued my husband in federal court when he, wouldn't capitulate to the DOJ pressure. They sued him for mafia racketeering and fraud and a bunch of other things. We fought all of this, and in 2022, the government returned 85% of our assets, so long as we promised not to sue them. And then in 2023, the federal judge in Amazon's civil case said that my husband had, in fact, not even breached his employment contract. And the activity that Amazon said was criminal was an explicit right given by Amazon in their employment contract to my husband. After that, the DOJ still told us they planned to move forward and indict my husband with a crime. And we were really stunned by that, because if Amazon had said this activity was okay in an employment contract, how could it be a federal crime? And we also learned right around the time that the civil court dismissed Amazon's case that the government had obtained 4 federal criminal guilty pleas from men who allegedly helped my husband violate his Amazon employment terms. The problem was that in those plea agreements, those men did not work at Amazon, and my husband's employment duties were listed out in the plea agreements. The employment duties they said they helped my husband break. And the employment duties listed were false, and they were wrong. And so we know from speaking with other people involved in this case that the federal judge emailed the prosecutors and asked them, like, what do you plan to do with these pleas now that you know the truth about Amazon's employment contract and employment terms? And over a period that lasted far too long, a period of 8 months, the DOJ slowly did an about face of this pressure campaign they'd had for 4 years against my husband. And they dismissed 2 guilty pleas that had not yet been entered. And then, in a really stunning move, they vacated 2 other guilty pleas that had been entered. And Justin, I think you'll know that the DOJ doesn't vacate guilty pleas. It's not something that happens.
A lot to unpack there. 1 minute summary doesn't do it justice. There's not a whole lot of vacating by the DOJ because once you're in their crosshairs, you going down. So for everyone watching, the cynics out there that say something had to have happened, to vacate guilty pleas, something is afoot here, that much I can tell you. Hearing you talk about this so easily as you breathe, I feel like the way that I might talk about how a defendant can prepare for sentencing. A judge said this, do it. A judge said you should build that, build it. It just flows out of you. I know this is totally consumed your life as you bring attention to it. Before we get into the total consumption, I have frequently said it's very difficult to fight the DOJ because they have endless revenues, our tax dollar. But to a point, they actually only have so much money, unlike Amazon and like one of the richest men in the whole world who, out of spite, because he's so rich, it's a rounding error. And then he can hire people from the DOJ and other organizations to come onto the team. Like, fighting Amazon is measurably harder than the DOJ because of the endless resources. Can you touch on the expense of it and what it's like to fight Jeff Bezos?
So we have spent or we have been billed over $3.7 million by lawyers. And that might sound like a lot, but if you take into account that this has been 4 years, we had to fight civil forfeiture, we had to fight a DOJ investigation, and we had to fight an Amazon lawsuit, that's actually getting away with very little. It's almost impossible to go up financially against $1 trillion company like Amazon. And it is, in fact, almost impossible to pay for to survive like a DOJ investigation and a federal trial. Only very few people can do it. Yeah, so the actual monetary cost has been stunning. And people always ask, how did you do it? Right? They took your money. Well, all the money that we got back we went to lawyers. But in the meantime, we sold our home, we liquidated retirement, we sold our car, we borrowed money, we raised money, and we made money. My husband and I are both lucky in that we both have graduate degrees, we're experts in our field, and we're both entrepreneurs. So we just hustled. Like we just kind of found ways to make money. But it was, I mean, just like Justin, we had to sell our home and move in with our 4 little kids into my sister's basement in California. Then we moved our 4 little kids to live with my father-in-law. Then we moved them to Ohio to live with my parents. I mean, we just did everything we could because we had to fight.
So most people are leaving California, so things have gone wrong when you're coming here. No kidding. I'm born in
Funny.
County. People are so sensitive. Let's talk for a moment about hypocrisy, right? It's troubling to people when a politician says one thing and they do another. I mention that because I follow you on Twitter and TikTok, and I'm going to put up some of her videos as they go viral and bring more attention to it. But you have commented how, like, Amazon will hire a new chief integrity officer, and he gives this corporate presentation about integrity and the corporate code of conduct and doing the right thing. When you hear that, yet that person is responsible for helping try to demolish and crush your family. How do you manage the sickening hypocrisy?
I mean, it hurts. Like I feel it in my bones. The person that, I think you're referring to is a man named Yusri Omar. And I say his name
That is
because I think
correct. That's the one.
I think it is really important to say the names because Amazon didn't do anything to us. People did. Amazon is a logo. And I hold people responsible because they haven't given up, right? Like they lost their civil case to us and they are now appealing that loss to the Fourth Circuit, which is mind-blowing to me. They're making this choice to continue to do this over and over again every day. And I watch Yusri Omar, he lives in Seattle where we used to live. He's got little kids like we have. He coaches their teams, and my husband can't coach our daughter's teams because he has to work endless hours to pay lawyers and try to, move forward in life. And it really hurts. And I just cannot imagine, Justin, and I am a former litigator, I cannot imagine getting up every day and looking in the mirror and knowing I did this to people and choosing to keep doing it.
So that leads to times where you get these massive wins, because I'm on your list and I'll see on TikTok and Twitter, and you're like, they're vacating DOJ press releases, they're sending money back, and you feel like, my God, they've won, it's over. And then I get the next message that says, it's not over. They're still going. It's continuing. Are you getting closer to some resolution of this case, or is the goal just to run out the Nelson family till you're no longer living in a basement, you're actually on the corner?
I mean, I do wonder, like, is that Amazon's goal? Like, I would like to ask Andy Jassy, and I have actually emailed him, the CEO of Amazon, like, is your goal for us to be homeless? Is that what you want? Because I don't know what else they want. We don't have any money, like, if they're suing us. But I think, the DOJ investigation is over. It ended in January of 2024. And that's a huge thing, right? That was a big piece of it, because it's one thing to fight a civil lawsuit against anybody. It's another to be faced with the idea of being indicted and potentially convicted of a crime you didn't commit and going to prison for something you didn't do. So that is a big piece of it, and the Amazon civil lawsuit, they lost and they're appealing, but I don't see how they can win this appeal. I think they're asking the Fourth Circuit to expand the definition of law to allow people who don't have monetary damages to sue people in civil court for financial issues. It doesn't really make much sense, but it could be over. It could be over in 2 months, or it could take a lot longer. And that uncertainty is hard, but you just kind of have to deal with it if you're going to stay in the fight.
In our last video, we talked about being a role model for your little girls and for people going through struggle, providing a voice to what it's like to go through such pain and heartache. You chose to do it publicly. I know when you started on TikTok and you began to get these viral videos and grow, you were taken aback probably a little bit by the criticism. Let's not focus on that, but by the support. Can you touch on the support that you've received and the inspiration that you know you are providing to people who say, it's okay to fight and you can fight
Yeah.
even against the trillion-dollar company?
I mean, I am stunned every day by the messages I receive, not just of support, but of, I feel like you're the only person in the world who might understand what I'm going through. Because this, people are railroaded in court all the time, people in family court, who lose their kids over very thin allegations that they say are not true. Um, People are accused of horrible things all the time that they didn't do, or people have family members who go through this. And there's so much shame, as you know, right, in criminal allegations. And so a lot of people don't talk about them, and you are isolated by it. And so to be able to create a space where people feel like they have someone who can see them or hear them has become like this massive privilege of mine. And I feel lucky to get to do it because I felt really alone. And it's why I reached out to people like you. I reached out and built community around people who understood the system that I didn't understand. Whatever side of it that they were on or wherever they were, I needed people. And I'm glad that I can be that for other people now.
I've said going through a government investigation is hard, but in my case, I did it. I broke the law. You can question how long I should have gone to prison for, but I was guilty. That made it easier to bear. But when you haven't done anything wrong and you have to endure this expense and the pain and shame and everything that follows, it really is an injustice, which can make it even harder to get out of bed and be a mother. And that's what I want you to touch on for a few minutes. When this was beginning and the lawsuits are coming and the legal bills are coming, in those early days, like getting out of bed and thinking of being a mom, how difficult was it as you attempted to do it?
It's still hard to talk about because I feel like I failed my kids. But I mean, at the very beginning, like I froze. I froze. And now I know that freezing is a biological response that many people have in crisis and in terror. Animals who are being hunted, they freeze, some of
Mhm.
them to stay alive. And that's what I did. And really, I think about it now, and this whole thing felt like being hunted. So it makes sense that that would be my biological response. But I froze. I lost 20 pounds. I was physically shaking. I couldn't I couldn't process it. I couldn't function. It felt so big to me. And at that time, I was going back and reading notes recently. Like at that time, we didn't even know Amazon was going to the DOJ and trying to get these criminal charges. We maybe thought some random person accused my husband of a crime and Amazon would want nothing to do with it. But it just felt very big and I didn't know how to process it. And I just knew that the life we had had was over and now everything would be different and that it would take a very, very long time, whatever happened. And it was also the pandemic. So, like in any other situation in my life, my parents or my sister would have come and sat with me, and they couldn't. We were in separate cities, and they couldn't be there. Um, it was 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks into it. My mom, who is the toughest person I know, FaceTimed me, and I was just sitting on my bathroom floor where I spent a lot of time because I don't know, I just wanted to crawl out of my skin. And I was sitting on the bathroom floor, and my mom looked at me and she said, "You got to get up. You got to get up and fight." She's like, "If anybody can fight this, you can. And you need to do it not just for your kids, but for your husband."
It's really difficult to deal with trauma, especially if you feel you haven't done anything wrong. A few months ago, I sent a voice message to Amy about an experience that I had endured where the state of Connecticut mistakenly got my information wrong and they seized, with Wells Fargo's help, all of the money from my bank account, business account. Checks were bouncing, money was coming in from clients that paid us. They immediately took that and like every dollar. And I didn't know how to respond. Let me say that again. I said I have to respond. I'm a husband, I'm a father. I have to take my little girl to soccer. I'm going to have to take my little boy to jujitsu that evening, and I still don't know if I'll ever get this money back. Now, thankfully, it was resolved in several days, and they said, "I'm sorry, we made a mistake," and they sent it back. But it didn't change that we had obligations. And I sent Amy a message that said, "I thought of you when this happened because I had an obligation to be a husband and father. Because when I was a defendant, I would go into my cave and I would eat fast food and I would ignore my family. I didn't know how to respond to trauma, and there's so much to learn from it." Let's talk for a moment about the haters. and how you're dealing with criticism, because you get it, I get it. We choose to be public, so there's the good and bad that accompanies this. Hardly a week passes without some hateful message, like it's in your interest to talk about prison because you want people to hire you without knowing, by virtue of creating this record. So many opportunities come. How have you learned to deal with the inevitable haters and criticism? Have you learned to overlook it? Offer some insights on that.
Yeah, I have. I do overlook it because here's the thing. Um, when I started, when I decided to speak publicly, I was doing it for two reasons. The first reason is that I realized my daughters were going to grow up and read about what happened. And I wanted them to read the truth as well as the allegations. And I wanted them to see that we fought like hell for them. You know, when we started fighting publicly, I didn't know if we would win or we would lose, but I wanted them to have a record of the fact that I laid it all down and did everything I could to keep their dad with them. So it's for them. So it's like if anybody else was going to say something, I don't care. This is for my girls. And the second reason that I started speaking publicly was because, you know, when you're accused of a crime, like you don't get to talk to DOJ. You don't get to talk to your accusers or Amazon. Like nobody will talk to us. But they could see me. They could see my videos if I made them. I thought maybe someday they'll watch them. And they did. And they did. And so that's who I cared about. And, you know, it's interesting because, you know, when I first started, I think a lot of people were like, I don't know, this sounds shady, right? And I would say to people, you know,
Well, they say that only because if it's your name versus the United States of America or an
yeah,
investigation has begun, people presume the government has done that because something. It's part of the reason it's so hard to prevail at trial, and so
yeah,
few people win, because it's like they indicted you and took you to trial. Something happened. It's hard to
yeah,
undo.
it is, it is. And the other thing is that like my husband worked in commercial real estate, which like is a completely unregulated business. You could say it's shady, fine. Like I don't take issue with that, whatever,
Yeah.
that's fine, but it's a business. And you don't get to go to prison for things that are shady, right? Like you have to have criminal laws, you have to have fair notice. You know, I've learned a lot about our Constitution and things I didn't know, even though I'm a lawyer. And like 4 of the 10 Bill of Rights have to do with your rights as a criminal defendant because the people that founded our country were persecuted and called criminals, right? And they wanted to make sure in this country that you had rights. And we have moved so far away from that. Even if you have committed a crime, we have moved so far away from that. Like if you've committed a crime, in most cases, unless it's some heinous, horrible crime of violence or, you know, in most cases, like you don't deserve the guillotine and you don't deserve to have your life ruined forever. You deserve to take responsibility, you know, serve your time or whatever reparations you must serve, and then go on and live a life. And that's what America was founded on. And we just don't do that anymore.
I have a couple of final questions as we continue in this series. What do you think? Amazon, we know, watches your videos, and we know Bezos is aware of this and the attention that you're bringing to it while he's on his big yacht with his new fiance. He's aware of this, regardless of the photos he's taken on the cruise with his shirt off. He knows this is what is their argument in pursuing it? Do you think it's vendetta? We can get them, or do you think they have truly convinced themselves, no, this guy did something wrong and we need to see it through to the end? What is their position, in your opinion?
So I think it's shifted. I think at the beginning, they did think my husband had done what they said he'd done. Now, I take issue with this because even if my husband had done what they said he'd done, the employment contract allowed him to do it. And this might be hard for people to understand. My husband did not take kickbacks. He was accused of taking kickbacks. He didn't. But kickbacks are not illegal. And so it's a terrible word people use. And so like your employment contract can allow kickbacks, rebates, referral fees, whatever it is, right? So I take issue with the fact that they didn't even like investigate really or look at their employment contract. But I think there's two reasons they continue this. I think first, when they thought something that kickbacks had taken place and that the employment contract didn't allow kickbacks, they participated in breaking a contract worth hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion. And if they can't justify their role in breaking that contract, they will be liable to the contract counterparty, which is not my husband, but the guy they said who paid kickbacks. They'll be liable to him for maybe $1 billion. So this is a real business issue. Would $1 billion lawsuit destroy Amazon? Most certainly not. But like it matters. It would really hurt, and it's going to really destroy a lot of careers inside Amazon. And then number two, do I think Amazon thinks my husband committed a crime or did something bad now? Absolutely not. I think they are so big and no one's running the ship. Nobody's making the decision here. And it's like paralysis by analysis. They're like, what do we do? How do we walk this back? What do we say? And until the moment they walk it back, until the moment they quit, they have to say, he's a criminal, he did something bad, because otherwise, they open themselves up to liability. I think what will be interesting, Justin, is there's starting to be more press around this.
Yeah.
And previously, Amazon would comment on the record and say my husband had committed an illegal act. Watch. I guarantee you, Amazon will no longer comment on the record because they're opening themselves up to defamation. And that's an indication of where they are.
Now, last thoughts, movies, TVs that someday will not be shown on Amazon Prime, I don't think. Is that fascinating to you as people are reaching out to you to learn more? And are they approaching it from a story of overcoming adversity, or is it bringing attention to the trillion-dollar company that tries to squash the little person, or is it all of the above? Help us issue those final thoughts for us.
Yeah, I think this story is all of the above, and that's kind of what people say when they come to us. I think there's the one hand, there's the David versus Goliath, but that's not a feel-good story for me, because David usually can't make millions of dollars to fight Goliath in court, and like that's not, and those are the people that you have to fight for. And so for me, the platform that I want to build from this is to abolish civil forfeiture. I think civil forfeiture is wrong. In America, the government can take your assets on the suspicion of a crime, and they don't have to charge you with a crime, let alone prove it. And like, we have due process here for people. And the way they get away with not giving due process in civil forfeiture is that it's your bank account or your car or your house, and your house doesn't have due process. But it's a legal fiction, and it needs to end, because it's a tool, it's a weapon, and it should end. But then also, I think a lot of people are really interested in how we fought, how you could possibly fight this. How did you do it? How did you take it on? And then also, I think a lot of women come to me. I'm a mom with 4 kids and I work, and they're kind of like, how did you survive the worst thing that happened to you? And I'm writing a book, and that's the theme of it, is how to survive the worst thing that happens to you, because bad things happen to all of us. And part of it is, how do you get up out of bed every day? How do you show up for your kids? Like, how do you do that when something just blows your entire life up?
I will close by saying we tell people in our community, Amy, to do what federal judges tell us to do, to document the journey, to be authentic, to build, create a new record if you've done something wrong. And what's nice is you've documented absolutely everything from when this started. So it's writing, it's TikTok, it's Instagram, it's media. It makes you authentic. So someday if you're on TV or in a movie or doing something and you're advising someone to do something, you need to get out of bed and be a mom. They may say it's easier said than done. You can say, no, I documented. This is how I did it. I think that level of authenticity and proof is everything, because it makes you authentic, and you're telling someone, I'm not asking you to do what I haven't done. That said, I'm going to give you the last word.
I think the last word, you might find controversial, Justin, what I want to say, but I think it's really important. I think if you've committed a crime, that taking responsibility for it is really, really important. One of the reasons my husband didn't have a choice and couldn't plead, even if, because a lot of people plead when they don't think they've committed a crime, but he couldn't, because he wasn't their main target. They wanted somebody else, and they wanted him to point the finger at this person. And some of the other men did plead who didn't commit a crime, and they have since called me and said, I wanted to fight, but I couldn't. Your husband did nothing wrong. But these men had pled guilty, implicating my husband. And what I want to, in addition to abolishing civil forfeiture, is to change this system of pressure and plea. It's like, we need to find some better path forward where we don't end up with people pleading to crimes that they didn't commit and implicating others, because it's not justice. And I don't think the prosecutors think it's justice. And I know that people pleading don't think it's justice, but you're just put in these impossible situations. And so it's a piece of reform I think we really need in the legal system.
I agree with you, because in 32 minutes, I have a call with a physician back east who is contemplating going to trial until the DOJ threatened to indict someone who had worked in his office, namely a family member. And you know what that gets you to do? It gets you to plead guilty in about 15 seconds. So overcharging, prosecutorial misconduct, it's out there, it happens. And many of these prosecutors, they can act with impunity. We'll save that for another video. We will do more videos. I'm so grateful that you're back giving us an update, and congratulations on documenting it and getting it to this point. And we look forward to seeing this through to a conclusion, and we'll do a video when that happens. It could be 10 years, but we're going to do another one.
We'll do it.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.